Clara had always been quiet. She worked at the town's community center as a cleaner and assistant, helping prepare chairs for concerts, cleaning the backstage area, and keeping everything in order. People barely noticed her. She wore the same plain sweater and long skirt every day, her brown hair always tied in a low bun. And she hardly ever spoke unless someone asked her something directly. No one really knew where she lived or what she did outside the center. To most, she was just the silent woman. The community center was hosting a music festival that week, and the main attraction was a well-known pianist who was supposed to perform that evening. Everyone was excited. Posters were hung, chairs were arranged, and lights were tested. Clara did her work quietly as usual, sweeping near the stage and wiping down the glossy black piano that stood under a soft spotlight. She paused, now and then, to run her fingers gently across the keys, but only when no one was watching. She always made sure no one saw her doing it. She didn't know why, but her heart always beat faster when she touched the piano, like it remembered something even if she didn't allow herself to think too deeply that night. Something unexpected happened. The main pianist had called to say he couldn't come. There was an accident on the highway, and he was stuck miles away. The crowd was already gathering outside, and panic filled the backstage. The organizer, a tired man named Mr. Jenkins, pulled at his thinning hair in frustration. "What are we supposed to do now?" he cried, pacing back and forth. Musicians were calling friends, asking if anyone could step in, but no one was available on such short notice. The clock ticked closer to showtime, and the guests began taking their seats. Mr. Jenkins looked around, desperate, until his eyes landed on Clara, who was folding a chair nearby. "Clara," he said suddenly, walking toward her, "you've been here a while. Can you play?" Clara's eyes widened in shock. "Me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, you," Jenkins said. "I've seen you touch the keys when you think no one's looking." Clara's cheeks turned red. I used to play a long time ago," she murmured, lowering her gaze. "Do you remember enough to perform?" he asked. "We need someone. Anyone." She looked at the piano, her chest rising and falling with silent thoughts, then slowly nodded. "I can try," she said quietly. No one paid much attention as she walked slowly onto the stage. They thought she was just adjusting something or testing the microphone. Even the host was unsure what to say, but finally introduced her awkwardly. "We have a very special substitute for you tonight. Someone from our very own staff, Miss Clara." There was some polite clapping, though some guests looked around confused. Clara sat on the bench, her hands trembling slightly above the keys. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the lights. The eyes, the doubt. In her mind, she was 8 years old again, playing in her old teacher's living room, the smell of fresh tea in the air, the wooden clock ticking gently on the wall. She placed her fingers on the keys, exhaled slowly, and began to play. The first notes were soft, hesitant but true. A simple melody flowed from her fingertips, one she had not played in over 10 years. The audience leaned in, some whispering, some frowning in curiosity. But as the music built, Clara's hands gained confidence, her body relaxed, and something beautiful began to happen. The notes wrapped around the room like warm light. They rose and dipped like waves on the sea. And the sound coming from the piano was full of feeling, pain, joy, longing, and something unspoken. People stopped whispering, stopped shifting in their seats. Even the musicians backstage peered through the curtains with stunned faces. Jenkins stood frozen near the side of the stage, his mouth slightly open, watching Clara transform in front of him. The quiet woman they had ignored, overlooked, forgotten was now controlling the room with nothing but music. Children sat still, parents leaned forward, elderly couples held hands, and even the ushers forgot to move. Clara's face showed no pride or drama, only peace. as if her soul was finally breathing again, and yet she never once looked at the crowd. She simply played, not to impress, not to prove anything, but because. The music was part of her, waiting all these years to be set free, as the last note faded gently into silence. Clara remained still for a moment, her eyes closed, her hands resting softly on the keys. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights above. Then, slowly, the clapping began soft at first, then growing louder, rising into thunder. People stood up, cheering and applauding, some wiping tears from their eyes. And Clara finally opened her eyes, startled by the sound, for the first time in years. Someone saw her not just as a quiet helper, but as someone extraordinary. And though she said nothing, the music had already spoken for her, louder than any words ever could. Clara stood up from the piano bench as the applause echoed through the concert hall. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it would burst. She didn't know where to look. So she bowed her head gently, then walked off the stage with quiet steps. She didn't smile or wave. She just disappeared behind the curtain like a shadow. Backstage, people were frozen. Some had tears in their eyes. Others looked stunned, as if they had seen something impossible. Mr. Jenkins ran up to her, holding both hands out. "Clara, that was—" "I don't even know what to say," he whispered, almost breathless. Clara didn't say anything. She just nodded and looked down, her face red and unsure. She had played with all her heart, but now that it was over, a wave of nervousness crashed over her. Had she done the right thing? Would people think she was trying to show off? She didn't want attention. She just wanted to help. The host of the show peeked behind the curtain. "Clara," he said softly, "they're still clapping out there." She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't want to go back out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The host looked at her with new respect, then nodded and turned back. But even as he walked away, he said to no one in particular, "She's not just good. She's something else." That night, people left the concert talking only about Clara. The headliner who never arrived was forgotten. Everyone was asking the same thing: who is she? Where did she learn to play like that? Why had no one ever heard her before? A few people remembered seeing her before sweeping floors, wiping windows, carrying chairs, but no one had ever seen her as anything more than staff. Now, they saw her in a completely different light. One man said, that wasn't just someone playing a song, that was someone pouring their soul into every note. A music teacher in the audience was so shaken he couldn't sleep that night. He had taught dozens of students, but none had moved him the way Clara did in that one performance. Word started to spread, not just in the town, but through social media. Someone had recorded the performance on their phone and uploaded it. By morning, the video had already gained thousands of views. People from all over were commenting, "This quiet woman just changed my day. This is what music is supposed to feel like. Why is she not famous?" Clara didn't know any of that yet. She was at home, sitting in her small kitchen, sipping tea and trying to calm her racing thoughts. The apartment was quiet, filled with secondhand furniture and a small upright piano in the corner. She hadn't played it in years, not like she used to, not the way she did last night. Memories filled her head, soft and painful. She used to be a child prodigy, playing piano in recitals by the age of 7. She had dreams of becoming a concert pianist, but life hadn't been kind. Her parents passed away in a car accident when she was 16, and she had no family to support her. She dropped out of music school to work full-time jobs, anything to pay rent and survive. She never talked about it, not even to coworkers. The piano became a secret, something she kept buried deep inside because it hurt too much to remember what she lost. But last night, the moment she touched the keys, something had awakened again. That night, her phone rang. It almost never rang. She didn't have many people who called, but this time, "It was Jenkins, Clara," he said, his voice excited. "You need to see this. You're all over the internet." She didn't understand at first, but when he sent her the link, her hands trembled as she clicked it. There she was, on stage, playing. Looking peaceful and calm in the glow of the spotlight, the comment section was filled with praise, love, and questions. People wanted to know who she was, where she had been hiding, and why no one had discovered her before. Clara stared at the screen in silence. For a long time, she didn't move, just watched herself playing. As if it were someone else entirely, she felt exposed, nervous, but also strangely warm inside. It had been years since anyone noticed her. Years since anyone called her special. And now? All because of one unexpected moment on stage. The world was looking at her with new eyes. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing she could no longer hide. The music inside her had been waiting for too long, and now that it was free, it refused to be silent again. The woman everyone ignored had just become unforgettable. The morning after Clara's performance, the quiet town was no longer quiet. At the bakery, the hair salon, the grocery store, people were talking about her. "She works at the center, right?" a woman asked as she paid for bread, "the one who always walks with her head down." "She played like a world-famous pianist," said the cashier, shaking his head in disbelief. "It gave me goosebumps." Meanwhile, Clara sat alone at her small table, a cup of tea turning cold in her hands. She hadn't slept much, her mind replaying every second on stage, every note, every whisper from the crowd. The video of her performance had now crossed 100,000 views, and the number kept rising. Her inbox, which usually sat empty, was now flooded with messages, people thanking her, praising her, asking about her story. Some even begged for more. Musicians from other cities reached out, offering to collaborate or teach with her. Local journalists wanted interviews, and someone had even sent a message asking if she'd like to perform at a larger event in the capital. But Clara didn't answer anyone yet. She didn't know what to say. Everything was moving so fast, and she was afraid if she touched it, it would all vanish like a dream. At work, things had also changed. Her coworkers no longer passed her without a word. They looked at her differently now, with wide eyes and shy smiles, unsure how to speak to someone who had become a local legend overnight. One of the younger staff, Mia, who used to ignore Clara, now walked up and offered her a coffee. "You were amazing," she whispered. "Like magic." Clara blushed and thanked her. Keeping her gaze low, she wasn't used to compliments, especially not from strangers. The only one who acted the same was old Mr. Jenkins, who handed her a folded flyer and said, "There's another concert next weekend, and I think they'd be fools not to invite you." Clara held the flyer in her hand, her fingers gently creasing the paper. A part of her wanted to say no, hide again, pretend last night never happened. But another part, small but die. Another part, small but growing, felt alive. It reminded her of a time when she believed music could be her life, not just a lost memory. That evening, Clara returned to the community center after hours. No one was there. The building was dark and quiet, just how she liked it. She walked slowly to the stage, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She sat at the piano again. This time without fear. No one asked her to play. No one was watching this time. It was just her and the keys. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move freely. The notes she played were different tonight. Not just beautiful, but personal. She was telling a story through the music, one that had been trapped inside her for years. It spoke of loss, of dreams buried too early, of long nights spent cleaning instead of composing. But it also carried hope, warmth, and strength. She didn't need words. Her music said everything she never could as she played. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently, not from sadness, but release. she didn't notice that someone had opened the door quietly and stepped inside. Mr. Jenkins stood at the back, arms crossed, eyes wet, listening without interrupting. He waited until she finished, then clapped softly. "That's the kind of music that changes lives," he said gently. Clara wiped her tears, smiling shyly. "I don't know what comes next," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to," Jenkins replied. "Just keep playing." The next day, the community center's phone kept ringing. People wanted tickets, some offered donations, others just wanted to know when Clara would play again. Jenkins put up a sign at the entrance. "Clara, live performance one night only." Clara didn't ask for it. But she didn't say no either. The date was set for Friday evening, 1 week from her surprise debut. This time, she knew she would be the main performer, the only name on the poster. The weight of that made her nervous but also excited. She began to practice every night, alone under dim lights, preparing something special. Not to impress, but to speak again, through the only language that ever felt honest to her music. By Thursday, word had spread far beyond the town. People from nearby cities were calling for tickets, some even planning to drive in just to hear the woman from the viral video. Clara stayed quiet through it all, focusing only on her music, because, for her, this was not about Famet, was about finally letting her voice be heard. Without saying a word, Friday night arrived faster than Clara expected. The small town's concert hall was packed beyond anything it had seen in years. People came from nearby cities and even distant towns, all wanting to hear the mysterious woman who played the piano like it came from her soul. Inside the green room, Clara sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her heart beating loudly in her chest. She could hear the crowd gathering, the voices, the footsteps, the soft music playing on the speakers while they waited. Mr. Jenkins knocked on the door, then stepped inside, his eyes kind and calm. "You ready, Clara?" he asked softly. She looked at him, nervous but steady. "I don't know if I'll ever feel ready," she whispered, "but I know I want to play." He smiled and gave her shoulder a gentle pat. "That's more than enough," he said. "They're not here to judge you, Clara. They're here to feel something." When the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the room. The host stepped onto the stage and said only one line. "Tonight, you will hear something real." The spotlight turned, and Clara walked out slowly, her head slightly lowered, her simple dress moving with her quiet steps. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench gently, and let her fingers float above the keys. Then, without looking at the audience, she began. The first notes were soft like a whisper, a gentle wave rolling into the room, and, just like that, the entire hall disappeared into her music. She didn't play like someone performing. She played like someone telling a story without words. The melody rose and fell, filled with memories she never spoke aloud. Each note carried a piece of her, the little girl who lost her parents too soon, the teenager who cleaned bathrooms instead of practicing for recitals, the young woman who silenced herself for years. Now she was letting it all out quietly, gently, honestly. The people in the hall sat completely still, many with tears in their eyes. They didn't just hear the music, they felt it. It reminded them of their own losses, their own dreams they had forgotten. An old couple in the front row held hands and cried. A teenage boy in the back, who had never cried in public, wiped his face with his sleeve. Even the toughest critics sat motionless, their pens resting on blank notepads. Clara played piece after piece, some classical, some her own creations, moving through them as if her heart had been waiting years to speak. There was no showmanship, no dramatic gestures, only purity and emotion. She never once looked up at the audience, but they never looked away from her. When she played the final note, she let it linger, letting the silence carry it to the back of the room. Then she slowly lifted her hands and placed them in her lap. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then the hall exploded with applause, louder than anything she had ever heard. People stood, clapping, shouting her name. Some holding their chests as if they couldn't breathe from the emotion. Clara stood up slowly and bowed, her eyes wet but her heart light. This time, she didn't run off stage. She stood and faced them just for a moment as herself. Backstage, Mr. Jenkins had tears in his eyes too. "Clara," he whispered when she walked in. "You didn't just play piano tonight, you healed people." She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. After the show, people lined up outside hoping to meet her. Some just wanted to thank her. Some wanted to shake her hand. Others just wanted to be near someone who had reminded them what real beauty felt like. But Clara stayed quiet and humble, only offering small smiles and nods. She didn't play to become famous. She played because she had no choice anymore. The music inside her had finally found its way out. Later that night, when she returned home, she sat by the window and looked out at the stars. She thought of her parents, of the little apartment where they once lived, of the old piano they bought her with their savings. She whispered to the night sky, "I hope you heard me." She knew they would be proud, not because the world finally saw her, but because she finally found the courage to be herself again. And as the town buzzed with her name and videos of her performance reached millions, Clara stayed grounded, because for her, music wasn't about fame. It was about truth. It was about healing. And finally, it was about freedom. The days after Clara's second performance were full of quiet change. She still walked the same streets, wore the same simple clothes, and bought the same bread from the corner shop, but something about her presence had shifted. People no longer looked past her. They looked at her, and more importantly, they looked with kindness. Children waved when she passed. Elderly folks greeted her with respect. And shopkeepers offered small discounts, not out of pity, but admiration. Clara, however, remained humble. She continued working at the community center, sweeping the same floors and stacking the same chairs. She didn't do it because she had to, but because it grounded her, reminded her of who she was before the lights and applause. But the world outside her little town was beginning to stir louder. Emails kept coming, invitations from music schools, concert halls, and even television programs. One message caught her eye. Was from a prestigious music academy in the city. They had seen her video and were offering her a full scholarship to return and complete her studies. They said they would be honored to have someone of her emotional depth and natural talent among their students. Clara stared at the email for a long time, her hand trembling slightly on the mouse. She had once dreamed of attending such an academy, long before her parents died, before life forced her to abandon music. Now the door was open again, but she wasn't sure if she should walk through it. She didn't want to leave her town, the people who had finally accepted her, the piano at the community center that had become her voice. That night, she sat by the piano in her apartment and played a quiet piece. One filled with doubt and hope. The melody seemed to ask, "Can you start over at any age?" As she played, her memories flooded back, her father's proud smile as she practiced, her mother's gentle touch guiding her posture, the tiny medal she once won at a school recital. The next morning, Mr. Jenkins knocked on her door, holding a newspaper in his hand. "You're on the front page," he said with a grin. "And they want you in the city." Clara gave a shy smile and invited him inside. She showed him the scholarship offer, the emails, the comments from people who had been touched by her music. "I don't know if I can leave all this behind," she whispered. "This town, these people, this place gave me my voice again." Jenkins sat down across from her, his eyes soft. "Clara," he said, "sometimes a voice grows so strong that it needs more space to sing." He didn't pressure her, but he said one thing that stayed with her all day. "You won't be leaving us behind," he said. "You'll be carrying us with you." Later that week, Clara decided to apply to the academy. She accepted the scholarship but with a request. She wanted to begin in a few months, not immediately, so she could finish her commitments at the community center and give one final concert for the town. The academy agreed, impressed not just by her talent, but by her loyalty and grace. As the date for the farewell concert approached, the town prepared in full. Posters were printed, banners were hung, and children practiced small dances and poems to perform before Clara's piano piece. The entire hall was decorated with candles and soft flowers, creating a peaceful and magical scene when the night arrived. It wasn't just a concert, felt like a goodbye between family. Everyone came, not just music lovers, but people who had never stepped into a concert hall before, because for them, Clara was not just a pianist. She was hope. She had shown them that dreams don't die. They sleep quietly until someone dares to wake them again. She had reminded them that even someone invisible could change lives with a single act of courage. Clara walked onto the stage in the same soft dress she had worn before. Her steps slow, her smile gentle. She sat at the piano, looked at the crowd for a moment, and then began to play. The piece she chose was her own, written in the past few weeks, which was called Return. It started with soft sorrow, slowly building into light, then blooming into strength and joy. Every note said something she couldn't say out loud. Thank you, I love you, I won't forget. And when the final note faded, silence fell over the hall, not heavy silence, but warm and full. Then came the standing ovation, louder than ever before. People shouting her name, many crying with pride and love, and Clara, standing with her hands to her heart, smiled wider than she ever had before. That night, she knew something deep in her soul. No matter where she went, this little town, this music, this feeling, it would always be her home. 3 months later, Clara stood in front of the tall glass doors of the music academy. She clutched her small bag and stared up at the beautiful stone building that seemed to hum with history and talent. This was the place where great musicians were trained, where dreams were shaped, where students spent years sharpening their skills and building their futures. Now, somehow, she was part of it. The city was big and loud, full of cars and tall buildings, and people rushing everywhere. Everything felt fast, busy, and overwhelming, but Clara stayed calm. She reminded herself why she was here: not to become famous, but to give her music the tools it deserved. Inside the academy, students filled the halls carrying violin cases, cello bags, music sheets, and headsets. Clara walked slowly, quietly, feeling a little out of place. She was older than most of them, dressed more simply, and unknown to many. But when she entered her first class and sat at the piano, everything changed. The instructor, a man named Professor Elias, had heard of her story. He didn't say much at first, only nodded and said, "Play something, Clara." She hesitated, then let her fingers touch the keys. She played a soft piece she had written herself, filled with light and sorrow and gentle beauty. When she finished, the entire room was silent. Elias blinked, then said softly, "You don't need to be taught how to feel, need to be given space to fly." The weeks passed, and Clara became a quiet star inside the academy. She didn't brag or boast, she didn't join the loud groups or compete for attention. She simply played, practiced, and listened. Even the youngest students began to admire her, whispering, "That's the woman from the video. And she plays like she's telling a story." But Clara never let it go to her head. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be ignored, and she never wanted to treat others the same way. One day, a girl named Livia approached her after class. She was shy, just like Clara once was, and she had tears in her eyes. "I want to play like you," she whispered, "but I get too scared." Clara knelt beside her and said gently, "Then play for no one, just for yourself, and the fear will go away. That became Clara's quiet mission at the academy, not just to learn, but to help others find their own voices. She stayed up late helping students with compositions, listening to their struggles and reminding them that music wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. Her teachers noticed her calm leadership, her heart, and her gift for teaching. And one day, the academy's director called her into his office. He was an older man with gray hair and a deep voice. "Clara," he said, "you've brought something rare to this place: humility, emotion, and honesty." He offered her something she never expected. "After your studies, we'd like you to teach here, lead a class, mentor students, and keep this light you carry alive." Clara was shocked. "Me? A teacher?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he said firmly, "because students don't just need technique, they need truth. And you have that in every note." Clara walked home that evening under the city lights, feeling something deep in her. Chest pride, not for what she had achieved, but for who she had become. She remembered the little girl inside her who had once played for no one but herself. She remembered the years of silence, of sweeping floors, of walking past pianos with her head down, and now she was being asked to lead others, to help them rise, to show them what music could truly be. That night, she wrote a new piece. It was called Lifted, and it was filled with the sounds of healing, hope, and quiet strength. She would play it one day not to impress, but to remind her students that no matter how invisible they felt now, they mattered. They always did. After one full year at the academy, Clara finally returned to her hometown. The city had changed her in many ways. Her posture was straighter, her steps more confident, and her eyes held a calm that came from healing. But deep inside, she was still the same Clara who once swept floors and whispered to pianos in quiet rooms. She carried no fame with her, no fancy clothes, no press following. Her only a small bag, a music journal, and a heart full of gratitude. When she arrived at the train station, she stood still for a moment, looking at the same wooden bench where she once sat, wondering if her dreams were gone forever. Now she was back, not lost, not broken, but full of music and memories she had gathered along the way. As she walked through the town, people recognized her instantly. They waved, smiled, and greeted her with warmth. Children ran alongside her, shouting her name, and old shopkeepers offered her fresh fruit and bread for free. "You've done us proud, Clara," said one of them. "You reminded the world we exist." She smiled and nodded, but deep inside, she was holding back tears. She had missed this place more than she realized. Mr. Jenkins met her at the community center, his hair grayer, his steps slower, but his eyes full of joy. "You look like someone who's finally standing tall," he said, and she laughed gently. He showed her around the center, some new paint, some new students, but the same piano still stood on stage, untouched, waiting for her. She walked up to it, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and whispered, "I'm home." That evening, the center hosted a special event, Clara's Return, a night of music and memories. The hall was packed again, even more than before, and this time, the feeling in the air was not just excitement, it was love. Families brought flowers, children held drawings of pianos, and the mayor himself arrived with a bouquet and a handshake. But Clara kept her speech simple, standing on stage with the microphone in hand. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me before I believed in myself." Then she sat down at the piano and began to play. Her first song was the same one she had played during her surprise debut, the one that had changed everything. But this time, it was different, smoother, richer, more confident. The music still held emotion, but it also held growth, strength, and calm power. With every note, she poured out her journey, her pain, her silence, her hope, and her rebirth. She followed with another piece, one she had composed just for this night, called Where I Was Found. It was gentle at the start, almost like a whisper, and slowly built into a chorus of light and joy. People wept openly as they listened, not because the music was sad, but because it touched something deep inside the part of them that still believed in second chances. When she finished, there was silence again, then a wave of clapping and cheering. So loud it shook the walls. People stood for several minutes, and many in the crowd had to wipe their eyes before they could speak. But something happened then, something Clara wasn't expecting, from the back of the room. An old man in a wheelchair was rolled forward by a nurse. His hands were frail, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. It was Mr. Grayson, her childhood piano teacher. Clara gasped softly, tears rising at once. She hadn't seen him since she was 16, before her life changed forever. He reached out and took her hand, his voice raspy. "You never stopped playing, did you?" "No," Clara whispered, kneeling beside him. "I just got quiet for a while." "I always knew you had something special," he said. "They all see it now." Clara hugged him tightly, her tears falling freely. That moment, in front of the whole town, wasn't a performance, it was a homecoming, a full circle of pain, promise, and purpose. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Clara stayed back alone at the piano. She played one final song to the empty hall, her fingers light and free. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore, not to the world, not to the town, not even to herself. She simply played because she loved it, because it was her truth, and as the notes echoed softly in the dark room, Clara finally felt complete. She had once been a forgotten shadow, but now she was light. She had once been silent, but now her music spoke for thousands. She was no longer afraid, no longer unsure. She was clear, the quiet woman who stunned the world with nothing but a piano and a heart too full to stay silent any longer. Months passed after Clara's emotional return home. The world had changed around her, but more importantly, she had changed inside. She was no longer the woman afraid to be seen, no longer the one hiding in silence. She had found her voice, not through speaking, but through every note her fingers shared with the world. Now, Clara stood in front of a large classroom at the Music Academy, where young students sat with eager eyes and notebooks in hand. She was no longer just a student, she was a teacher. Her journey had come full circle. When she first entered this building, she had walked with hesitation, unsure if she belonged. Now, her steps were steady, her head held high. Her students respected her deeply, not just because of her skill, but because of her story. They had watched her play in concerts, seen her name in magazines, and even studied her viral videos. But what impressed them the most was her heart. She never taught with ego, never pushed anyone to be perfect. She reminded them again and again, music isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being honest. Every class with Clara felt like a gift. She listened to their mistakes with care and helped them understand their fears. She shared her own journey, the pain of losing everything, the loneliness of being invisible, the quiet courage it took to say yes when the world finally noticed her, and slowly, her students opened up, not just musically, but emotionally. Some who once trembled on stage now played with tears in their eyes and pride in their hearts. Others began composing, telling their own stories through sound. They didn't just grow as musicians, they grew as people. Clara's room became more than a classroom. It became a sanctuary for anyone who ever doubted themselves. Outside of the academy, Clara's fame continued to rise. She was invited to play at famous halls across Europe, asked to speak at conferences about art and healing, and featured in a documentary about silent talents who changed the world. But she never chased fame. Every time she performed, she carried her small-town roots with her. The memory of sweeping floors and secretly playing the old piano when no one was looking. She always made sure her town was credited in interviews. always returned to visit when she could. She helped raise funds for the community center's music program, donating instruments and giving free workshops during the summer. One day, she received a letter. In the mail it was handwritten. Shaky and full of emotion, it was from a young girl in another country who had seen Clara's story online. The girl had lost her parents and felt like she didn't belong anywhere. She wrote, "Your music saved me. I thought no one understood how I felt. But when I heard you play, I cried for the first time in years. Thank you." Clara folded the letter and held it to her chest, tears in her eyes. This was what it was all. For not the applause, not the awards, but the quiet healing that music could give to a stranger who needed it. That night, Clara sat at her piano and began writing a new composition. She called it The Letter, and it was soft, tender, full of comfort, like a warm blanket wrapped around someone who had almost given up. She later recorded the piece and shared it online with a simple note. "This is for anyone who feels." Alone You're Not, the piece went viral again, touching millions around the world. But Clara didn't celebrate. She simply smiled and went back to her classroom the next morning, ready to teach. Years passed, and Clara's name became known far and wide, but she remained the same quiet, kind, and honest. She never forgot the night she was forced to perform. The night that changed her life. She often told her students, "Sometimes life pushes you. Not to break you, but to reveal who you truly are." Looking back, she realized that the stage didn't make her a musician. Her silence did. Her pain did. Her truth did. And in the end, that's what the world truly needed. Not just another performer, but someone real. Someone who played not for attention, but for connection. Someone who healed through harmony and showed others how to do the same. That was Clara's legacy. Not faith, faith that even the quietest voice can echo forever when it dares to sing. And so, Clara played on not to be heard by many, but to reach the hearts of the few who truly listened.